Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to our next session of reading Aristotle's Politics. Today we're doing chapter two of book one. So let's start it. This is actually the longest one. This is remember in chapter one he introduces the theme of defines what the city is, right? He distinguishes politics from other activities. Now he's going to be looking at the question of how to kind of the naturalistically of understanding the parts. Um, Now, in these matters, as elsewhere, it is by looking at how things develop naturally from the beginning that one may best study them. So we're going to study them from how they naturally. This is a naturalistic argument, genetic argument. Right? This is how something begins and how it genetically does this. Now, first, then there must be of necessity be of necessity be a conjoining of persons who cannot exist without one another. On the one hand, male, female, for the sake of reproduction, which occurs not from intentional choice, but as is also the case with the other animals and plants, from a natural striving to leave behind another that is like oneself, semicolon. On the other, the natural ruling and ruled on the count of preservation. So stop. Let's stop and understand this first. Let's compact and depact this first sentence. Second sentence here. So there must be a conjoining, a kind of joining together, conjoining. This means what? There's some kind of a koinonia is a conjoining. Okay, a koinonia is this a thing of common. So it's something common. There's a conjoining means that there's a together put together. So the most initially, the simplest conjoining is between two people, right? Two people. And he says, okay, this is the first one, right? This is the conjoining of one another, and this occurs what? And he gives us the first conjoining is between male and female, and this is why it's being done. He says it's well, I mean, he gives the most crudest. He says, well, male and female, right? On one hand, it's male and female, and like all the animals, it's an urge and desire to leave one like behind like themselves, to reproduce. So reproduction, right? This is a natural striving. All natural beings have a striving to reproduce, okay, to reproduce and to leave another behind like themselves, okay. So therefore, all animals, all biological beings have this desire to reproduce, this natural inclination to leave something behind. That's, in other words, that's the future. This is the progeny, the future of this, the progeny of something of this, something that's left behind that is like you, okay. And he says, and this is not, and this reproductive thing is not an intentional choice. So notice it's not from intentional choice, but like the animals, a desire, a natural desire to leave behind something like itself. So therefore, the first thing is he reduces it to the reproductive structure. This is the first natural conjoining. It's something that is not done by choice. It is something that people drive together to come together to do it. Um, the second is what? It is it is between the naturally ruling and naturally ruled on the count of preservation, to preserve. Okay. And let's look at the next sentence. Is it for that which can foresee with the mind is the naturally ruling and naturally mastering element, while that which can do these things with the body is the naturally ruled and slave. Semicolon. Hence, the same thing is advantageous for the master and slave. Now, this is in this incident. Now, this is careful because this is confusing language. In this, and I would actually read this in the Greek, not as saying that this is all very. His translation here suggests in the Greek, this is a literal translation of this, but to understand what the Greek is trying to say here is that in this case, where what is the master and the slave, and that this is this in this case of naturally ruling and naturally ruled. The naturally ruling is what it is. What the ability of the mind. Those who have the mind, who have the intellect, who can foresee what is beneficial for preservation. Okay. Whereas the body, whereas the ruled has the body to deliver labor and effort to this. So this idea of the intellect versus the body, and this is a very classic argument. This is from Plato. Even this is that the mind or the soul rules the body despotically, like a master. Um, in that sense, because it has, and it does so justly, in the sense that because it has it knows what's good. The body doesn't know. It has no way of knowing. Okay, and hence the slave, the natural ruled, only can without this is lost. It's gone. Okay, so therefore, from this point, is that Aristotle's talking about is that this idea of the natural ruler, natural thing, and this can lead us to an argument of, and I think Aristotle. This is a mis. What's so interesting is here in book two, he does not mention something that he will mention to spend two books on. He will have the biggest digression in the ethics on this in book 8 and 9, which is that of friendship, a philia, friendship. Why? Because philia is this longing for sharing a life together with another, this companionship, this idea of care, of love. Um, he does not talk about love here at all. He ignores love. We have two criterias here at this moment. We have the right that we come together for the sake of reproduction. So it's purely instinct. It's not something choice. It is not out of choice. It is simply a desire to leave something like behind ourselves. It's reproductive. And then the second is the rule of the foresighted, the knowing over the unknowing. This seems to be the logic of what derives us to conjoin. The knowing over the unknowing, that's utility, right? The one who knows what is best and how to get it. The body, the one who has the ability, has the force and the might to deliver, but doesn't know what to deliver. Okay, this is what, and therefore, without the mind, the body would be lost. The rule would be lost. The natural rule would be lost without the natural ruler. Now, this is a continue here, so therefore, it is like this. Now he has this thing he gets in trouble for. Now the female is distinguished by nature from the slave. So wait a minute, the woman is not the slave. The woman is not the slave in a sense. He's saying, and I think he's making fun of. He's going to be making fun of Hesiod a little bit here. Hesiod days, works and days, right? And he has this quote: "For nature makes nothing an economizing spirit, as the smith makes the Delphic knife, but one thing with a view to one thing, and each instrument would perform most beautifully, finely, if it served one task rather than many." So this idea of division of labor, is arguing that nature does divide, but sometimes it does it not perfectly, but it would best to kind of like, and the Delphic knife is that economizing spirit. The Delphic knife is it is really talking about a tool, a knife that was made, that was Lord has a note towards the Delphic knife, which is some kind of knife of religious context in Delphi with various sacrificial purposes. But the meaning is uncertain. People don't know. I would argue that the Delphic knife was just a common knife. It was a knife that it had multiple purposes. It didn't. It just. It was like fork, knife, everything. Okay, it was something that was not. It's the opposite of this. But one thing with a view to one thing. As Smiths make the Delphic knife in a way that it's multitask. Well, nature is more kind of dividing up the idea of task to task, and each instrument would perform most finely, beautifully, if it served one task rather than many. In other words, that you can do, this idea that the most beautiful, the most noble, the coloss of an instrument that we design it would be so almost like a division of labor, division of task, division of labor, division of function, to make it more logical, more rational, right? Now, he says, the barbarians, the barbaros, though they have the same arrangement for male, female, and slave, the barbarians have the same relationship between female and male. The reason for this is that they have no naturally ruling element with them. The community of men and women is that of female slave and male slave. So therefore, in other words, the barbarians tend to have everyone a slave, and that there's no naturally ruling element. That the barbarians lack those who really know, those who have mind. The barbarians are just body. Okay, this is why this is the sense. This is why the poet says it is fitting for the Greek to rule the barbarians. The assumption being that the barbarian and slaves are by nature the same thing. This is without the idea is that the barbarians are seen to be the barbarians are those who aren't civilized, who lack uh, uh, who lack a culture, who lack a thing that distinguishes them. The barbarians are other, who are not just other, but they are less other. Now we have to be careful here because in book two, he will one of the cities that he of the three cities that he will talk about. One will be the of the best finally cities beautifully administered. One of them, Carthage, is not a Greek city, so it's a barbarian city. Okay, that's even the barbarians. It's possible for them to have that these foreigners can have someone with knowledge or someone who has wisdom and or the argument even then we'll get to it when we look at it. But here that this is the idea here is that and again I think he's relying on opinion. This passage here about the barbarian is like slave is because of the lack, this idea that they lack, there's something different from them, that they lack culture, they lack development, and and for the most part they have societies where if there is the ruler, he's the boss man, and everyone else is a slave, right? They tend to be despotic societies in that sense, are not free societies. Societies, and that's the difference. A free society is everyone is a free person. A despotic society is everyone a slave. And hence this is why free people should not be treated. Free people should have what the capacity to have the ability to have mind or soul by which they are able to know how to rule themselves and to rule each other. Right. This is the perception of this. Now, from these communities, now this is these two communities. Now, notice this that he speaks that there's this. In other words, these two forms of koinonia, these two communities, or these two forms or logics of koinonia. The first one is of what that of the husband wife or the reproductive urge, and then that of the knowing versus the unknowing, of the mastery versus the naturally ruled over naturally ruled. Right? He says Then the household, oikos, first arose. And Hesiod verse is rightly spoken. First a house, a woman, an ox for plowing. For poor persons have an ox instead of a servant. Or a delos, this is the word delos, meant slave. In fact, um, uh, um, and how the household is the koinonia community constituted by nature for the needs of daily life. So the needs of daily life, our daily life, that fulfills our needs for our daily. This is the household, the oikos. Chardonius, Chardonius calls its members messmates. Um, Epimendes of Crete, stablemates. Now these, again, these are note 8. Um, I can do this. Let's do this. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah. Legislature Croninus of Catina is mentioned again in 3:2 and 3 book 3 12 and book 4:11 and 13. Epidemus of Crete is said to have written poetry as well as prose works on the Cretan regime. This is Diogenes' Lecreus, book 1, lines 109 to 15. So in other words, this is Epidemus talks about this as messmates, and then Cronus calls them messmates, people who share mess, eat, they eat together. This is sustaining oneself. Sustaining oneself is being able to eat. You eat so you survive, right? You eat your food. This is sustenance. This is for the survival of life. And daily need is to survive, right? Immediate need is to survive. And survival then leads to we survive, but then we reproduce, have children, and things like this, right? So therefore, this is that first idea, and that's why it's the male. This idea of the household is the first relationship is the people surviving, messmates, and then the need to meet the need. First, the house, a woman, and an ox for plowing. So therefore, this idea that this is the minimalist idea of an oikos. The first community, first koinonia, next level of this, arising from several households. Okay. And for the sake of non-daily needs is the village. The village is kind of a medium state. But wait a minute, how is it? But village is not political yet. It is an extension of the household. These are several households together. And what will happen is the division of, like, remember the economizing spirit of nature? The nature is not economizing as us. Uh, uh, it creates a division of functioning. Well, this is what will happen to the village is a village, well, we have a people that in order to live better, more than simply, in other words, that are not immediate needs in that sense, but rather it makes it, we can live longer, live bigger than the needs. So therefore, I can specialize. I can now focus. One person can focus on being a dairy farmer, and the other one focuses on being the wheat and uh, 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 crops, and the other one vegetables. In other words, you can specialize, and therefore each part does the specialization allows for diversity and greater production. Right. This is what he's saying here that the village allows more than mere survival, mere daily needs, but it's still extension of the household. By nature, the village seems to be above all the nature by nature the village seems to be above all an extension of the household. Its members, some called milkmaids. They are the children and the children's children. In other words, the village is it's different. And actually, he says they are the cousins and the things like this. This grows like this, right? This is why cities were at first under kings and nations are even now. So therefore, he makes his argument that the village itself, at one level, the division of skills and division of, but it also emerges from the reproductive, that the children, the children's children, the children's children, the children's children, and this is why from the family, the husband-wife bonding, we get not only the village, but we also get the ethnoi, the nation, the genos, the race. In other words, the genos, all this merges from the reproductive point of these two. So therefore, genetics. And we get Aristotle here as a geneticist. Biopolitics in the Jewish genetic sense, that we get this genetic construction of the koinonia. The koinonia is the lowest level of koinonia. The koinonia that is the least is that the husband-wife pairing. The koinonia at the most extreme is the genos, that of the race, that of the human being, right? So therefore, that is the extreme. Now, the koinonia, therefore, the realm of koinonia goes from this to this. Now, the point where it is perfected, that the koinonia that best satisfies our needs as human beings and our ability as human beings. This, as we talked about earlier, is that will be the city in that sense. We'll talk about this more. So, if the city, this is what and he goes that eldest king, and this is why he says in other words, those okay. This is why the first cities were under kings, because of they were just kin groups like that of the father. This is in other words, again, this image of the king is that of the father or the ancient elder, the grandfather, or things like this, right? And then nations are even now by tribes, the ethnoi, are now. They're still under tribes. They're under kings. Why? Because they have this idea of the head of the family, head of the ancestors. Um, for those who joined together were already under kings. Every household is under the eldest as king, and so also were the extensions of the household making up the village as a result of kinship, king and kinship, king, father, king, etc. Okay, this is the origins of this. And this is what Homer meant when he says that each acts as a law to his children and wives. Again, that's again from the Iliad, right? For men were scattered and used to dwell in this manner in ancient times. So, therefore, in other words, this is the idea that the earliest man would have lived. This is man in its primitive state, earliest times where there was not it was scattered and used to dwell in this of families and households. Okay, so this is anthropological in the sense, and it is for this reason that all assert that the gods are under a king, because they themselves are under kings now, or were in ancient times. So therefore, the divine, this idea that Zeus is king, like this, that even the gods are under king. And in other words, he's suggesting that because they were under kings, they assumed that the gods were under kings. Anthropomorphizes this aspect. For human beings, assimilate not only the looks of the gods to themselves, but their ways of life as well. Again, he's talking about the gods of the Greeks. They attributed the bodies and their looks, so that human beings not only anthropomorphize the gods by the way they the looks of the gods, but also their ways of life, their their ways of life as well. In other words, again, Aristotle is saying we human beings tend to anthropomorphize the divine. Now, this is a very difficult thing, and I want to talk about this for a second. This is that complete community. That is the community that is perfect or finalized and realized, the telos, a form of community. Why am I talking about this? This is where Saint Aquinas and Morbic who translate this as perfectus, complete, perfect communitas. The perfect community arises from several villages. By complete, it means it achieves a kind of, I'm going to use the kind, if you know Pareto optimality, this idea that you just get a point you get, and if you go keep on going more, you get less benefit, right? The law of diminishing marginal returns. Like if you have to go more, not in other words, in most utility benefit situations, cost benefit relationships of cost and that there's a certain point that at the benefit you're not getting that more you do doesn't mean you get more the same rate of return. At a certain point, the more you do actually gets less and less return. To the it may not be just like this immediately, maybe just like the curve slows down, and at some point it starts regressing, right? This is the law of diminishing marginal returns or diminishing marginal utility, right? Um, what he's saying here is sound to the community. In other words, at this level, what a community can do and how it can deliver the returns and benefit, so that you for your way of life, and that in order to live well, live beautifully, live nobly, live live the best, live the best. Um, And what is living the best? This is this word, autarkos, self-sufficiency. Now, some people, this is the big thing. This is self-sufficiency. That's a communist world. This is the communist world. Everything's so small. And whereas we live in globalism and trade and diversity. No, autarkos does not mean self-sufficiency in this limited. I don't. What he means by this is that you're living a thing that the community is your sufficient enough, that it's sufficient to live life well, and that if you can, let's say you need an extra, you need more. Okay, you might do for extra more to get so that you might exchange or do things. But here he's saying, otakos is this idea of now, this is a big thing because this is the difference between medieval community and ancient thinking and modern thinking. We believe in that this idea of complete absolute. We believe that there's an infinite benefit, but we know that's not true. If utility was infinite, then Pareto's laws and Pareto optimality would not occur, or the laws of diminishing marginal return or diminished marginal utility would not exist. Natural things have, yes, at the level of ideas and the level of dreams and the level of the imagination and the level of abstract and maybe even in the realms of concepts that are divorced from biological reality, but biological things, physical, biological, material things, tend to have diminishing marginal returns, particularly physical things that have that deal with kind of human or biological reality. They do tend to have something like this. So it reaches, in other words, it reaches this carnoia, reaches a full level of self-sufficiency, so to speak, while coming into being for the sake, while coming into being for the sake of living. It exists for the sake of living well. Well, beautiful living. Wow, ooh. This is that eudaimonia, well living, beautiful living, for the sake of living well. Every city, therefore, exists by nature. City is natural. Every city exists by nature. If such also are the first community. If such also are the first community. So the city is this moment, the city becomes a peak. It's that perfect koinonia, that it becomes this for the koinonia. And therefore the city exists by nature. Now the question is, wait a minute, it doesn't really, it starts as family, emergence. But this is, actually, this is right. This is an emergent property. But but this is one that's nature designs. In other words, even though human beings need to make it, it's a mixed property. That yes, it takes human action and human things to do, but it fulfills something that is emergent, that was intended or part of the design that nature designed into humans or human beings. Okay, that it fulfills it allows us to fulfill our nature as human beings. So, in other words, every city, therefore, exists by nature, and if such, also are the first communities. In other words, and they are the first. They are the. And by this, he means first here. They are the first really true form. This is the point where they are really this. They become the true koinonia. They become the you know that they are the perfectus koinonia, the complete community in that sense. This is that this is becomes the embodiment of what community really ultimately means. The city in the koinonia. This is why something we should understand uh, uh, Coulange's Ancient City as much a work of sociology as anything else, tied and therefore part of a discussion that will derive thinkers in sociology like Durkheim, Weber, and Frederick Tönnies. And Tönnies is Gemeinschaft, Gesellschaft, community, because the problem of the city and the state, the state and society, the city and the community and the state and society. These are the structures that they're doing. These are the difference of ancient and modern. The ancient world or the natural world or the pre-modern world uh, is the world of communities, these natural organic communities that are immediate and like this, whereas modern world is an artificial construction of voluntary choices before utility. So, okay, that's Hobbes' law, right? But therefore, this distinction is that the distinctions are tied within this problem here. That and we and I think when people like Locke purposefully conflate community and society, purposefully conflates community and society in ways that perhaps is wrong to do so. As anyone who went through the Locke series, you'd see how he does that. He will constantly treat community and society as synonymous things. The Greek here, there's no equivalent of society in the Greek. There's only communitas in Latin, community in the English, and the koinonia. This is what it meant. This is not a society. Society is voluntary. As particularly go again, look at Gemeinschaft, Gesellschaft, or community and society by Tönnies, and he makes it clear this dichotomy. I think he's right here, and he's a student of Hobbes. He's an expert on Hobbes. There's another good book about this I would recommend if you're ever doing this study. It's this. He's I can, Isvan Hont. He's a sociologist of. I think he died. He was a political theorist at Cambridge. He was. I think he died a couple of years ago. This is the last book he did, the lecture, where he kind of deals with this problem of this question of this, and the difference of modern society of that. So I think this is why this line here is very important here. And now he says, "For the city is their end, and nature is an end." The city is the end for human beings, and nature is an end. What each thing is, for example, a human being, a horse, or a household, when it is coming into being is complete, is. We assert the nature of that thing. So therefore, the thing is really only the thing when it's complete. In other words, we don't call a human being the hand. We don't, even though that this is part of it. In other words, a thing that's separated from it isn't the thing. Um, uh, um, it is the whole, and it's the completed thing. So the cells, the mere cells of an infant, is not human yet. Well, this is the problem. Is it? It's potentially the human. The fetus becomes the first form of it, but it's not the fully formed human yet. It is there, its potentiality there, the potentiality of all these things come together. It is when it becomes that moment when it fulfills itself. This is what Aristotle says: the thing is the real thing. When it perfectus is the Greek Latin word is perfectus or complete. When it is complete, when it's completed itself as its what the nature of a thing is, its development, and its stage where it is. Um, coming into being is complete, is, as we assert the nature of that thing. So we understand the nature of thing not in terms of its beginning point, but rather its final completed form. And that's the point. We understand the nature of a thing. We don't understand the nature of the thing at its origin from where in its early stage, but rather to what it turns into, its end, its final thing, the outcome. The telos, the thing that we do. We understand the thing, what it's going to become, and then we understand and measure it and judge it from it, and understand its nature in terms of this. So, whether a horse, a human being, or a household, we have to understand it in terms of its end, not at its source in that sense. We measure it with how it comes at that end. Again, for the sake, and that for the sake of which a thing exists. Oh, I put my phone on hold. It was this weird, a restricted number. Dun, 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 dun. In other words, this is again, he says here that, let's say it again, that for the sake which a thing exists, or the end, is what it is best, what is best. And self sufficiency is the end and what is best. Okay, so what is self sufficiency? Self means okay. What is a self sufficient? Self sufficiency has to be understood as what the end of something is, the final stage of something. So, what is the final stage of a household? That is, how it fulfills itself, its purpose, its goal. It is the end stage. So, it's able. In other words, a child is yet sufficient. The idea is that it grows into it. It becomes an adult. The adult is the agent of that becomes the child is still developing. That is, this is when it's developed at a point. Now we continue, we grow old, and we lose ourselves. But this moment of perfection, this we're completed. We're completed does not mean we've gone to the end of our cycle, but rather we what is the thing is when does it become itself complete at its state? And therefore, this is what Aristotle means here. And therefore, to understand what is the end, this is the best. What is best? In other words, the things that allow it to be itself fully and completely. This is what is best. So that the best for man is that stage that they can enjoy that life, enjoy that. This is what is best. And self sufficiency is an end and what is best. Now, he has a footnote here, 13. Lord, the end, telos, of a thing is the complete or perfect form. Aristotle appears to the doctrine of final causes, and this is from physics of the scientific writing. The final, the four causes: the material cause, the efficient cause, that or pudding cause means the one thing. The material cause, the matter, things that make it up. The final cause, the pudding cause, or the efficient is that what was the sequence, what came before it, what immediately happened before it, sequential and that stuff. Formal means the form of a thing, and then finally is the final or telos, and this is the end or purpose or reason. Now, he says, it is far from clear, however, how far the analogy between a city and a living organism is meant to extend. Okay, I think that's true. This is that Aristotle here is giving an idea of an organism and like this. And the city is not purely a living organism. In other words, but the logic of why it is the humans are the living organism. The city is not organic in the sense that it is like our bodies and ourselves. It is something we create. It is artificial in that sense, but it's not purely artificial. It allows us to fulfill it is something we create to make us to complete ourselves so that we are able to be completed as human beings. This is the idea of emergent aspects of things. So let's continue. From these things, it is evident then that a city belongs among the things that exist by nature, and that man is by nature a political animal. Famous line. But therefore, in other words, these things, that a city belongs to the things that exist by nature. This idea that city is this by nature, and again, nature does not mean merely organic; it also means emergent. I think this is what, if you go into the organic versus non-organic, the physis nomos, the physis nomos divide of the sophists is the big one. And in many ways, Plato does this. And for Plato, the city is always nomos, the city is always conventional. The city is always this, and therefore, the city is only and everything of nomos, everything of techne, and everything like this are reflections of the form, of the perfect form of this. They can only be reflections. So therefore, the city is always the city at the form of the city is ideal, it's perfect, whereas the city in being is always going to be like anything, it's a reflection, an imperfect reflection, never achieving the ability to be just. It will always be a slightly deviant from what is true, what is at the level of the forms of the eidos. Okay, and this is the problem here. Aristotle says, no, we don't live in those. That's nonsense. We're biological beings, and biological beings. The telos is not aiming something transcendent; it's within us. Teleology is within us, our nature, the end towards which we move. Now, some of the but modern evolutionary biology denies that there's a teleology. They It denies that there's a transcendent teleology, not an emergent teleology. By emergent teleology, in other words, a teleology that is tied to the function of what we're doing. Any biology cannot escape teleology, function and purpose. But wait a minute, evolution is accidental. No. Yes, it's somewhat accidental, and it's because you have to react to things that the organism is reacting to things that are not organic in themselves, or they're accidental, and they're reacting to it and has to adapt to overcome the but they're still trying to do what? Survive, and not only survive but to prosper, to live well. So this is what we should understand here. And it's not this that therefore it's not the simple nomos. For nature is not simply that. Therefore, nature is this phusos, and then anything else is convention, right? And Aristotle seems to suggest that it's no. There's by nature also an example is how many that is beavers. The beavers, these things that go in the woods, these creatures who chop down trees, and they often bring the tree. They live in waterways. And the beavers live in waterways and and they knock the trees down. They put them in the water and they build their hives, their hunts there. Is the beaver hut the thing they create in the water? Is this natural, or the beehive, the wasp hive? The bees and the wasps, they make these hives where that they use for the sake of reproducing things. These are not part of their biology. They make it through they they process through their biology to make and construct the structure that becomes the hive, and by which they put the young bees to heat up, and they use to create the future. But without the hive, there could be no bees. But the bees it's not organic. It is a emergent property. The city is like the hive. The city is like the beaver dam. In other words, this is these. It is something that the entity needs. It's habitat to be itself, to fulfill its nature, but it's something that it's emergent. It is something they create. It's not organic in the strictest sense. This is how I would respond to Lord's point about here, that it is this that nature here is not mere organic; it's also emergent, that emerges to fulfill what the organic requires. Um, and that's why all the animals that man is by nature are political. He is also, and he who is without a city, though through nature, is without a city through nature, rather than by chance, is through nature, rather than by chance, is either a mean sort or beast, or a superior to man, a god, is either a beast or a god. In other words, if you don't have a city, if you're a being, if you're kind of being, if you're a man, human being, and you don't, and you, it is by nature you don't have a polis city, this embodiment of perfect community. You either are below animals, beast. You are either what is it? He says either a mean sort, mean by base, cruel beast, the low. Mean. This is the English word mean is tight, or low, cheap, or beastly, or this in most translations say beast and God, right? Or superior to man, Ubermensch, Uberman, Superman, godlike. Um, he is without clan, without law, without hearth, like the person approved by Homer. For one who is such by nature has by this fact a desire for war, as if he were an isolated piece. And I gave him back in. Now, okay. Again, this is that weird passage. This is Homer's Iliad, 9, verses 63 to 64. Without clan, without war, a law here means an enemesis. Without hearth is the man who longs for chilling war among his people. No, Aristotle reverses the terms for this comparison, right? It is not certain exactly what game is referred to, beyond it involves the use of dice. And the piece apparently is given a technical name in the description, unyoked or axi, suggesting its unprotected position. Okay. So therefore, this like, and so another one is draughts. The other game is often translated as draughts. He chooses backgammon here. Okay. That man is much more of a man, human beings, not man as male animal, but man as human being, the anthropos, is much more a political animal than any kind of bee or herd animal is clear. Now, this is, I'm going to look at 15 here. This is History of Animals 1.1, Book 1, Chapter 1, 487 B34. Aristotle defines political as the one has a single and common task, ergon, energy, function, and indicates that category includes bees, ants, and other animals of this sort, in addition to man. So therefore, there's political animal, other political animal, but the man is the most perfect, the perfectus community animal. Um, um, for as we assert, nature does nothing in vain. Okay. Again, remember that there's nothing in vain. Uh, and man, human beings alone among the animals, have speech, logoi, argument, speech. So he says, what makes one, and it's speech that gives us our perfection, that we're over the other animals in that sense. And nature, and because of this, man, and remember, speech, language itself, and this is that whole discussion about language that we should have, people should have, that our language is, this is it again, this is, language is not natural, it is a convention. It is things that we create. Every language is a convention, and no more in that sense. It is something that every people is different. There's no natural language for human beings. There's no human language. There, Languages are always emergent of properties of communities. But therefore, it is like the city in the sense. Language and the city are both kind of constructs used to fulfill something inherent. So man has a potential for logos, but needs language in order to fulfill it. Okay? So therefore, this is why this is a very important thing here. That that man alone among the animals has speech. The voice indeed indicates well. The voice indeed indicates the painful or pleasant, and hence present in animals as well. For their nature has come this far, that they have a perception of the painful and the pleasant, and signals of these to each other. But speech serves to reveal the advantageous and the harmful, and hence also the just and the unjust. So therefore, wait a minute, this is something that, in other words, painful and pleasure. The animals, in their voice, he says here that animals can make sounds about pain and pleasure, and the animals know that sound means pain. So animals, it's not about communication per se. We all communicate. In fact, our physical body and our body communicates. Our body language communicates. It's communication, but language is not communication. Language is one step further. It's abstraction. It takes us. It gives us those. It is able to do now talk about things that animals cannot talk about. We can do the advantageous and the harmful. It reveals the advantageous and the harmful, and hence the just and the unjust. Before he continues in paragraph section 12. For it is peculiar to man as compared to other animals that he alone has a perception of good and bad, and just and unjust. And the other things, by good means good, as in we say good, not only the good, the well, the good, the noble, and the bad, like skata, like shit. Okay, the good, to benefit, shit, bad, and just and unjust, and the other things of this sort, and and community. And these things is what makes a household and a city. Now, the Greek word logos means speech and reason, right? It is man's reasoning ability that enables him to distinguish between the just and the unjust, and therefore conduct himself morally in relation to others that make him this. And this is what makes the household of the polis. And this is why the polis is both something in its basis in reasoning. It's a construct of reason. So that's what this thing. It's construct of it's fulfilling, and it fulfills something inherent in the nature of the thing. So therefore, this is why, and that the city and the household. This is why a community of the things is what make a household in a city. In other words, this idea of speech, language, speech, reasoning, logos, is that our ability to know what is. And also remember the idea of the one who knows versus the one who doesn't know. And this is how the master. It is through speech the knowing conveys to the unknowing. It conveys and reveals that it knows the just and what is unjust, and knows the unjust, knows the true and false, the good, the bad. And this is the way, and they're able to communicate and understand. The city the city is thus prior by nature to the household and to each of us. Now, by this, now everyone said, "Well, wait a minute," but the household's really logically by prior here means it's not that the household evolves first, but it's prior logically, because the household is the perfected. It is it is the perfect embodiment. Is that final stage? In other words, and that is because why? Because the household is not sufficient. It can lead to some self sufficiency, but it's not complete sufficiency. This is why it needs the village. But the village is not sufficient itself for the highest peak. The city is that perfectus communitas. It is that complete koinonia. In other words, and therefore of this, and he says, um, In other words, a household for each of us. In other words, for the whole must be necessary be prior to the parts. For if for if the whole body is destroyed, there will not be found a foot or a hand, unless in the sense that the term is similar, as if one speaks of a hand made of stone. But the thing itself will be defective. In other words, the hand, there's no hand, or the body, the hand is left, but it's not a human being. It's this, or I can make a hand, so I can create a hand, but it's not going to be the perfect thing of the hand. But what about robotics, man? It's artificial. It tries to imitate the hand. It can do it, but it's not. Even then, it's not going to be perfect in that sense. Um, and that's because it cannot perfectly replace and perfectly embody. Maybe it will come a genetic returning it. That's something different, though. That is reconstituting what was. Okay. Um, um, Everything is defined by its function and its capacity. So structure, a function and capacity, structuralism, structural functionalism, in fact, right? Structure and function. Everything is defined by its function and its capacity. And if it is no longer the same in these respects, it should not be spoken of in the same way, but only as something similarly termed. So the hand is not, in other words, the severed hand is not really a hand. It is, we call it that because it's what it was, and we're used to calling it that, what it was. And so it's not, it is not a hand, it was a hand. But we still simply, for simplicity's sakes, we tend and actually that's language. We often use language, don't use language exactly. We use language often effectively and efficiently, simply. And sometimes this is why we often tend to, in our everyday ability of communicating, sometimes what we do is we make we kind of blur the words and blur the meanings to make things that aren't the same appear the same, because sometimes it might be just easier to do that for the sake of simple communication. Because if we were over precise, it'd be very difficult to understand things. Maybe have someone who didn't know to know what something did. In other words, this would makes the ability of one person to other person to know what the other person is saying. The mechanism must be enough that the meaning can be simply conveyed. So sometimes what happens, in order to make the transmission easier, what we do is we simplify, right? So that's the language itself is a simplification of mental constructs. That the city is both by nature and prior to each individual, then is clear. So therefore, it is basically arguing that the city is therefore prior to the individual. It is both by nature, is by nature and prior to each individual, is clear. In other words, and if the individual, when separated from it, is not self-sufficient, he will be in a condition similar to that of the other parts of relation to the whole. One who is incapable of sharing, or who is in need of nothing through being self-sufficient, is no part of a city, and is either a beast or a god. So back then, in other words, beast again, beast or a god. In other words, he is incapable of sharing or having in common. Now, this is being a partner in koinonia, a community, a koinoian. That is, the sharing here is koinoin. This is sharing, koinoin, and this is the thing, the body, the koinoia. So this is what he's pointing out. This is what it means here. One is incapable of being of koinoin, or is in need of nothing through being completely self-sufficient. It needs nothing. Human beings need. We are needy. Therefore, we fulfill our needs by living in a koinonia. So if I don't need anything, I'm so sufficient. I this is no part of a city, and therefore I'm either a beast or a god. And the imagery of here, this is that famous myth of either Cyclops or or uh, um, or was it Odysseus, or I forget what the metaphor is. The beast or a god, Achilles, right? And the implication is that the Cyclops is actually a god. Flip, no, that's the inverted idea, that the Cyclops is really the god, and that Achilles is really the beast. Some people argue. Accordingly, there is in everyone by nature an impulse towards this community. So therefore, everyone has this desire to be in a community. There is this, and therefore, this is another thing. This is something he talks about. This nature towards koinonia, sharing something in common. And this is where I think French philia comes in, philia and love. And I think this is why the ethics books eight and nine, that long digression from the questions of virtue, the discussion of virtue, is really a kind of needed supplement into any discussion of the city, because the original twofold, the reproductive and this, is not the end all and be all. Because I think if you without friendship and without the discussion of friendship, we don't really see the political aspect. We end up seeing the idea that politics is mastery, which is not. Aristotle wants to deny that politics is not mastery. But if you understand everything in terms of the naturally ruling and naturally ruled, then it would be mastering. If politics was merely the ability of ruling and ruled, and that the naturally ruling would rule over the naturally ruled, that's mastery. It's natural mastery, but it's mastery. But this is not. But this is not possible. Human nature doesn't allow for the simple knowing of who's ruler and who's ruled, and we because that's why we create language, and therefore no human being is so imperfect that they cannot share and rule, in a sense. So therefore, this is why, and because it's not clear who is the ruler and who is ruled, this is why we have to share a rule in that sense. And this is something he will talk about later chapters. Um, um, and yet, he who founds so everyone is by nature implied this, and yet he who founded one, in other words, the first creator, is responsible for the greatest of goods. So whoever was the person who created the first city is the Bible. We know this. The Bible tells it's Cain, right? But this is where the Bible and the Bible and the book of Genesis and the Bible of Genesis. This is something Leon Cass and I had a discussion of by letters all the way back in 1990s. Because in his book on the eating book, the Hungry Soul, he makes a comment line there about the tension between Aristotle, the Aristotelian idea of that the city is that natural place, where the biblical account, the city is a place of done is not godly and not it is not the end that God intends. So therefore, this is a very interesting problem. This is a theological political problem in one sense, a distinction between the Bible, the position of what God intends versus of Genesis versus what nature intends, and that therefore this is a difference. And Aristotle wants to argue that nature is the more authoritative here, and that the God, if there's a God, it's merely the God is nothing more than the funding principle of the arche, by which other archives, the unmoved mover, that's the only real truly God in the thing. Everything else, that the divine, are just are merely just beautiful, perfected beings who don't need each other in that sense. But human beings can never be gods in that sense because we need each other. Um, and we need the city, and the city fulfills our nature as being. So This is why the one who first founds the city is the greatest of goods. For just as man is the best of animals when completed, when he's fully man, when separated from law and adjudication, law and justice, right? He is the worst of all. For injustice is harsh. For injustice is harshest when it is furnished with arms, and man is born naturally possessing arms for the use of for prudence, for use of prudence and virtue, which are nevertheless are very susceptible of being used for their opposite. So prudence gives us that prudence and virtue. In other words, our arms allows us through prudence, good judgment, knowing what is the best and what is how to do it. And virtue is the exercise of achieving what is best, doing what is best. Um, Arms are the means by which we can do. Prudence discerns what is best. Virtue is our doing what is best, and the arms are the means by which we act, do the execute what prudence has indicated and virtue reveals, which are nevertheless susceptible of being their opposite. So therefore, our rationalism, imprudence, and our vice can use in other words, our weapons, also weapons. We're naturally armed. um, and it can be used as much for imprudence and vice as for prudence and vice. This is why, without virtue, without arete, excellence. This is our idea. Okay, virtue here means not It means arete means. This is why virtue may be the wrong word. Virtua, virtue in the Greek, arete means the person doing it perfectly. It is doing the right thing in the right way at the right time. The metaphor, the closest thing we have to metaphor is the athlete doing a perfect game, playing the game perfectly, playing the game he's playing. Now the game isn't virtue, it's not virtue, it's the doing. See, virtue is a doing. It is a doing the thing beautifully, doing it well, doing it fine, doing it the right way, the right way, so that's perfect in that sense. It's not some achieving some ideal, because the thing that's happening is not it's a flux. So doing it in a way that achieves it does it, and doing it the right degree, the right way, the right amount, to the right end, for the right way. Um, all these things are just, this is what arete means in this sense, right? So and without virtue, he is the most unholy. Without arete, without this excellence, he is the most unholy and the most savage of animals. In other words, human beings who are not ruled by prudence and virtue, they are ruled by the opposite. They are the what? The most unholy, the most savage of animals, and the worst regarding to sex and food. Now, this is that weird line. Um, Aristotle means to allude to incest, cannibalism, and similar phenomena. Or is see ethics, these chapters in ethics, about that incest, cannibalism, and similar phenomena. This is the things. But also, there's something interesting. Remember, the word sex here is not sex; it's ta Aphroditus, the things of Aphrodite. This is like so beautiful reading in the Greek. He goes, in other words, the humans are the worst with regard to the things of Aphrodite and food sex. Um, Justice is a thing belonging to the city. So justice is tied to the political, the city. And the city is the political form. The political form, it is the form where politics is embodied and lives. Now, the polis, city, the Latin would be civitas. Some people, the city, or we translate city, but city both in Latin has two double senses: urban, and then civitas, civilis, civitas, right? The civitas is the the civil, the civilis. This is that civitas. The civitas is the Latin structure of what polis meant, right? And therefore, the city is what belongs. Justice, dike, right, right, justice, is belongs to the city. It's political. Politics about justice. Politics about power. No, power is means. See, all the idiots out there say, "Well, politics about power." Power is nothing but a means to an end. It's not the, and even if we take the crudest understanding of Machiavelli, the ends justify the means, but not. But Machiavelli never said any ends justify any means. Never said that. Yes, he said he kind of argues that the end does justify the means, but not every end is justifiable. The just end is justifiable. The noble end is justifiable. And perhaps we should not. Machiavelli would say, okay, sometimes we have to use, and here we will see that we actually get to the practical books, books 4, 5, and 6. Aristotle is a lot closer to Machiavelli than you normally think. Aristotle's no fool. In other words, he won't say it out loud that the end justifies the means. No, he doesn't say it like that. He would deny that. In fact, he would argue that only we should try to be beautiful. We should do it beautifully. In other words, Aristotle always prefers to speak beautifully. That's why the word Aphrodite is not something more vulgar. Um, 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 he's going to present the best possible case, and about the very bad things, he will present either in silence, or if he has to talk about it, he will talk about it in only later and in very reserved ways, as he did here, or even here about food and sex. For adjudication is the arrangement of the political community. So adjudicating is an arrangement of the political koinonia. And justice is judgment as to what is just. And this is that weird thing here, right? And in fact, this is a very, for dike is an ordering taxis of the political community. And this is one translation. As is usually understood, taxis here appears to be the sense of institution, while dike refers to the process or administration of justice. Justice used in the text here, daikosune, connotates the virtue of justice. And he points to Sanders. This is not a translation. This is a commentary in Sanders' commentary in book 1, in book 2. I think Sanders is right here, and I think this is a point where that is the case, and I think this is how we're going to end it. We've been talking for a long time, so we're probably all tired following this. So therefore, this is what he says. That therefore, in other words, the arrangement of the political community. This is what adjudication is. The deciding of what is just. The adjudicating means the reasoning about justice. The reasoning about justice. That's what adjudication means. The reasoning about justice. This is usually say the courts, right? But this is really case about justice. And then what is and the arrangement for that, deciding about this is the arrangement of a political community. And justice is judgment. It is our decision. Justice is judgment about what is just. In other words, our reasoning about what the just is. The just. Here we end the second chapter, sorry. The next time we'll go to the next thing. We'll stop here. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below. Like, and I'll put them below and I will respond when I see them. Like or dislike, say why you dislike something, criticize, share with a friend, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, or get a friend to subscribe. Share on social media as well. So if you if you want to help us bring others' attention to this. If you want to follow me on social media, the links are below. There is links to other links below too. You can, if you want to help, you can help by becoming a member of Subscribe Star, Patreon, and contribute. You can, something you can join. It's very small. It's like $5, $2 or $3, $5 a month. You don't have to, or you can go. Uh, Actually, this would be useful doing. So we're studying this, studying the politics. This is my book I did. It's a study guide. It's Cliff's Notes, basically Cliff's Notes for the politics. It's not a commentary. It is a study guide, a research text reading guide. It's called a notebook for Aristotle's politics, a workbook. It's designed to go through the chapters. It's charts, outlines, structures, chapter by chapter. Sometimes like we dump chapters together because they're structurally that way. I have places where you can go through it. Space that you can write notes here, but it's also after every book, I give area a place that you can put your notes here. So this is something when you should be. You take your text and you go through it, and you put your notes. You think about it like this and put your notes in it. So if you buy this, you buy it by Lulu. It's better for me because I get the money, and on Amazon because the percentage that Amazon gets profit from, I don't get. But if you send it there, the retail price goes to me. So it's pretty good. Otherwise, I just get the minimum little effort about the money that you get from much more than a book. I get maybe 10 cents. Okay, I get nothing from to this very day. I mean, I never got any money from this. Academic books you never get any money for. This is a very. I think it still sells pretty well. It's still available. You can, and it's like 23. In my other book, I still get okay. Once every year, I'll get like a $20-$30 check from my $20-$30, maybe $50 a month, maybe a year from my Aristotle's Best Regime book, which was 2004 book on Aristotle's politics. Only on book three, focuses on book three. So this is my book. This is about all the politics. It's a kind of introduction book of doing this, a reader's guide, a student notes. So if you want to help, you can do it this way. I talked about the other things already. That's it. Have a good day. Take care. Bye bye. And we'll end here. Be well.